Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Andrew Wilson. Our top stories this hour. Israel's Prime Minister approves plans for an attack on Rafah, just as the ceasefire talks are said to be on the brink of restarting. Officials in Gaza say an overnight attack on a refugee camp has killed at least 36 people, including many children. And we speak to the Spanish charity Open Arms, whose ship has brought the first maritime aid to Gaza. President Putin accuses Kiev of disrupting elections as a Ukrainian missile strike kills 2 in Russia. And the grassroots players scoring big with fans. Tens of thousands turn out to watch China's best village footballers face off in their Super League. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has approved plans for military action in Rafah, where nearly 1.5 million Palestinians are said to be sheltering. The US has stressed it wants to see a plan for civilians ahead of any assault. Israel says it's preparing for the mass evacuation of Palestinians in the city. The announcement from Netanyahu comes as Egypt indicated that ceasefire talks would restart in earnest as early as Sunday. Associated Press correspondent Sam Mednick reports now from Jerusalem.
This approval is official. That happened on Friday. Israel's government said that it did approve this plan to attack Rafah. The plans, however, the timing is still unclear. It is unsure when they are going to go in. But there are about 1.5 million people sheltering in Rafah. Israel has said that it is going to move them into what it's calling these humanitarian islands, these humanitarian enclaves, and it said it's going to do so with the help of partners. It's going to give people water as well as food, and it's going to give people shelter. But the plans are very vague, and it's unclear where people are supposed to go. Much of Gaza has been reduced to rubble. The humanitarian situation is catastrophic. Thousands of people are facing starvation. The United Nations said on Friday that malnutrition rates among children is unprecedented. At least 23 children have died in recent weeks from malnutrition as well as dehydration. And the United States has made it very clear that it is concerned about the risks of Israel entering into Rafah. Earlier this week, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that they had yet to receive a plan about what Israel is going to do with the civilians in Rafah. I have spoken to people in Gaza, in Rafah, as well as in the north. They have said that they don't have food. They wait for hours and hours just to get a little bit of water. They don't have shelter. I spoke to one man named Saeed in the north of Gaza. He said that his family members, they have all lost more than 10 kilograms just trying to find food, and he said that people are starving.
Well, given everything you've just said, and the delegates from Egypt and Qatar certainly, and perhaps others will be joining for these ceasefire talks, restarting as early as Sunday, there's going to be a lot of resistance, international resistance, one suspects, to this this potential attack in Rafah.
There has been a lot of pushback on them going into Rafah, but there is right now this renewed push to have these negotiations come back. I mean, they were seen as all but dead until a few days ago, but Egyptian officials have said that talks could resume in Doha as soon as Sunday. This would be the first time that Israeli officials as well as Hamas leaders are coming together since the beginning of Ramadan to have these talks. Now, Hamas has put together a new proposal, and that proposal would have a ceasefire, an end to the war, but it would keep them in control of Gaza. And what this would look like would happen over 3 phases. Each phase would be approximately 6 weeks long. What we know is that the first phase would see some Israeli soldiers come out of Gaza. Thousands of people would be allowed to go back to their homes in the north of Gaza. It would also see the increase of aid being allowed into Gaza. This first phase would also see the release of 35 hostages in Gaza. They would be women, elderly people, as well as sick people, in exchange for 350 Palestinian prisoners. It would also include the release of 5 Israeli soldiers being held hostage in exchange for 50 Palestinian prisoners, some of who are serving long sentences. Phase 2 would see an entire ceasefire to the war and the return of all of the hostages. And then Phase 3 would see the return of the hostages who have been killed, the return of their bodies, in exchange for Israel lifting its blockade on Gaza and for the restructuring of Gaza. Now, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called these talks unfeasible, and he said that they don't make sense. However, he has still sent this delegation to Doha to continue in the discussions. I've spoken to some hostage negotiators who said that this could be a positive step, that Hamas seems a little bit more flexible this time than it has been in recent weeks, and the fact that Israel has sent a delegation to Qatar is something positive that people are being cautiously optimistic of right now.
In Gaza, the first maritime aid shipment to arrive in the enclave has been fully unloaded, ready for distribution. Meanwhile, Gazan officials say at least 36 people were killed in overnight Israeli army attacks on the Nuseirat refugee camp. Our correspondent Noor Harazin has more now from Rafah.
Well, yes, on Friday's evening, the Israeli warplanes targeted the At-Tabatibi family home, which is located in West Nuseirat refugee camp, specifically in the Al-Jadid refugee camp in West Nuseirat. And this family home, there were around 70 people residing in that home, whole families, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. And in its recent statement, 40 people were killed in this Israeli attack, including women and children and also pregnant women. They say that more than 30 people were injured. Some of them are actually in a critical condition. So the death toll of the attack on the Tabatibi family could rise in the next few days, if not hours. This is not the only Israeli attack on the Nuseirat refugee camp in the past 24 hours. We're talking about several strikes in west, east, central Nuseirat refugee camp, also in West Khan Younis. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, also mentioned in its latest statement, 63 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip today. And this brought up the death toll here in Gaza since the 7th of October up to 31,553 Palestinians. 72% of them are women and children, while the number of people who got injured is now over 73,000.
And Noor, this maritime aid, the first shipment, has arrived in the north of Gaza. And we understand that you're in the south, of course, but what will this delivery mean?
I mean, any aid delivery will mean so much for the people in northern Gaza. We are talking about starvation, malnutrition, a famine actually in northern Gaza, especially now in the month of Ramadan. We are talking about some areas in northern Gaza that literally the people there have nothing to eat or drink but little water twice a day. Yes, it is real. It is happening. People in the north are suffering. They are struggling. But talking about the open arms ship, here's the thing. This ship docked in Al-Baydar area, which is 100% controlled by the Israeli forces. So technically, this aid is now not in the hands of Palestinians. First, the Israeli army is taking control of this aid. Then this aid will be loaded in trucks, and then these trucks will be allowed in northern Gaza through the main street of the Al-Rashid Street. And over the past weeks, we've many times and many occasions reported Israeli attacks on the Al-Rashid Street. In one attack, actually, more than 104 Palestinians were killed while they were waiting for the humanitarian aid. So, yes, until now, getting aid in northern Gaza is still very dangerous. It is not safe, but this is the only thing that the people in northern Gaza can do to bring some food for their families.
The aid shipment to Gaza arrived on a barge towed by a vessel run by the Spanish charity Open Arms. It sailed from Larnaca port in Cyprus to the Gaza shore, carrying 200 tons of food in an operation fraught with logistical hurdles. I spoke to Open Arms operations coordinator, Gerard Canals.
There were several challenges. This operation ended yesterday night, and it was like 7 hours just in contact in Gaza, but we've been discussing with the authorities during the last 3 weeks. And that thing that happened yesterday was just one of the proposals, the accepted ones, but we were proposing other alternatives, and in the end, this one was the accepted one by the authorities. And there were obviously a lot of safety and security issues that we have to address before starting this operation.
Well, presumably you'd agree that this is happening purely because nothing else is happening at Rafah or Erez or Kerem Shalom. Nothing else is getting through. So you are the last resort at this stage.
Yes, and this is sad because obviously by sea we have a limited capacity. There are several hundreds of trucks waiting to get by road. They test the airdrops, and we are just providing one more way to get in with food. At this moment is the one working, or at least it worked for once. We will try to do it over and over again and with bigger ships, and let's see. Obviously this is a drop in the ocean, this is not enough, but this is what we can do, and this is our part on this.
So talk us through then, you're the head of operations for Open Arms. What sort of plans do you have? Are you going to work with other NGOs? How are you going to upscale this type of maritime relief organization?
This is yet to decide. I mean, we are focusing now on checking every detail of the operation that just happened, and then obviously we want to continue that. We want to make it bigger, to bring more food, maybe also medical, but I don't know. This is something yet to be decided. But at this moment, we are very happy with what happened. Everything was according to the plan, was smooth and without problems over the problems that we already predict that we could happen. But yeah, we had been contacted by several organizations, but we asked them some time because we want to do it well. So for that, we need to debrief and to check how to do it better, obviously.
Can you see a situation a few months down the line where the jetty is more established and there are more ships back and forwards from Cyprus, bringing aid in a kind of conveyor belt of supplies? Can you see something as ambitious as that taking place?
Obviously, that would be proper. I mean, if they could build a port or a facility with the capacity to unload ships directly without this platform that we've been using, then at this moment we will probably won't be needed, because I mean, we are not a big ship. But we have a certain capacity to do things different. So that's why they call us and they choose us. But once they have a port there, they could do it much better.
Well, is that the secret to Open Arms, that you're used to operating in challenging situations where other organizations might not want to go?
Yeah, I think so. Because this corridor was open since November, but no one could find a way to do it. And in the end, we just put some imagination and some expert people thinking, and we got many ideas. And in the end, this idea got through, and it's been accepted, and it's working. So, yeah, I would say that we are good at this.
India, the world's biggest democracy, has announced that voting in its general election will begin on April the 19th. The parliamentary election will happen in phases to allow nearly 1 billion eligible voters to cast their ballots. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is looking to become only the second ever Indian leader to win a third term in office. Polls are suggesting a comfortable win for his Hindu nationalist BJP party. Vaughan Getting is to become the new Welsh First Minister after winning the country's Labour Party leadership. It will also make him Europe's first black leader. He is currently the Economy Minister and will take over from First Minister Mark Drakeford, who is stepping down next week after sticking to his pledge of only serving 5 years in the post. Air safety officials in the US are investigating after a United Airlines plane landed with a panel missing. The fault was only discovered after the Boeing aircraft had touched down in Oregon on a flight from San Francisco. The missing panel was on the underside of the aircraft next to the landing gear. You're watching CGTN. Still to come, President Vladimir Putin accuses Kiev of disrupting elections as a Ukrainian missile strike kills 2 people in a Russian border town.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
This week on Razor, the vault being built to preserve the diversity of our internal microbiota.
People that have a more traditional lifestyle have a much more diverse microbiome, and it's known that basically like the microbiome as we have it in the westernized world has been basically losing some of the microbiota that is also probably contributing to the fact that we have more non-communicable diseases.
Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. Israel's Prime Minister approves plans for an attack on Rafah just as ceasefire talks are said to be on the brink of restarting. And officials in Gaza say an overnight attack on a refugee camp has killed at least 36 people, including many children. A Ukrainian missile has killed 2 people in Russia, and a separate drone attack has set fire to a Russian oil refinery. This comes as Russians head to the polls on the second day of a 3-day presidential election. President Putin has accused Kiev of trying to disrupt the vote after Ukraine launched repeated strikes against Russia this week. Now let's go live to our correspondent, Dasha Chernyshova, who joins us now from Moscow. Dasha, good to see you again. More cross-border attacks into Russia. What more can you tell us?
Well, that's right. There have been not only the air raid sirens going on and off in the Belgorod region, where 2 people died as a result of the Ukrainian attacks and many more have been wounded, but also an attempt to cross the Russian border from the Sumy region in Ukraine into the Kozianki in the Belgorod region. This attack has been stopped, prevented by the Russian military. We also have the confirmation that most recently the air defense systems have intercepted 15 shells from the Vampire MLR, as the region of Belgorod has been once again subject of the Ukrainian attacks. The governor there in this region, Vyacheslav Gladkov, has said that despite those attacks, people in the Belgorod region and Belgorod itself are still going to the polling stations. They are not afraid of that. In the meantime, we also have seen attacks all throughout the Russian regions. Most recently, we've heard about the oil refineries being targeted in the Samara region. 2 oil refineries were under attack. One caught fire, and the understanding is that there have been certain interruptions made to this oil refinery. But also, it is appearing to be the latest trend with the Ukrainian armed forces trying to reach the Russian oil refineries. It's not the first one that has interrupted its work after the Ukrainian attack.
Dasha, it's day 2 of these presidential elections now. How are they going?
Well, to this moment, we understand the turnout has exceeded 50%, and the Russian authorities are doing their utmost to encourage high turnout in this year's presidential election. Keep in mind, it is the first time the presidential election is taking place for 3 days instead of just 1. And in many regions, voters can vote online, and constantly those who haven't voted yet receive messages from the authorities and state services saying that they still have time to cast their ballot. The Russian authorities have all been saying that exercising the civic duty is important for the future of the country. They have a choice to whom they want to vote for. But Ella Pamfilova, for instance, the head of Russian Central Election Committee, has said that the choice should be to vote for the strong, independent and sovereign Russia. Also, she gave a briefing and said that there have been irregularities reported throughout the first 2 days of the voting in 20 regions of Russia, 29 polling stations. There have been attempts to pour dye into the ballot boxes. 214 ballots have been spoiled, but they are not going to affect the outcome of this voting. We also understand that there have been attempts of setting fire to the polling stations. Obviously, all those who have perpetrated that have been detained and will be punished. And also, we have heard from the Russian authorities that there have been cyber attacks against the electoral infrastructure, as well as some of the state services websites and the United Russia Party.
Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow, thanks very much. Demonstrations against extremism have been held across the UK on Saturday. The biggest was in London, where protesters marched on Downing Street as part of an event called Stand Up to Racism. Our correspondent Rahul Patak now reports.
They came in their thousands, groups from all over the country calling for an end to racist violence and extremism in all its forms. The Stand Up to Racism demonstration is the first in a series of events leading up to the United Nations Anti-Racism Day on the 21st of March. One of the groups taking part was the Society for Anglo-Chinese Understanding, or SACU. The organisation says xenophobia or anti-Chinese sentiment has been on the rise in the UK, especially in the years since the pandemic.
People suddenly have this license, or they have the right, they can just abuse people verbally on the train, public transportation, especially when you're on your own, and then you get physical attack. And it's not just like, you know, in poor area, in everywhere.
I was essentially blocked and barred from taking part in my university's sort of political life, in getting involved in sort of like groups and cultural societies, and it was all because I stood up for myself as a Chinese person.
Well, this march comes at a time when racism in public life has been pushed firmly into the spotlight. Last week, a major party donor to the ruling Conservative Party was accused of making racist and misogynistic remarks about the black opposition parliamentarian Diane Abbott. Also, the former deputy party leader of the Conservative Party, Lee Anderson, defected to the right-wing Reform Party after claiming that Islamists are taking control of the London mayor, Sadiq Khan. The protesters here claiming that these were examples of how hate speech had become normalised in mainstream society.
Racism has been ramped up, particularly by the government and the Tories, really, around, you know, the trying to redefine extremism to take in a whole load of groups that are not remotely extremist.
Do you think racism is on the rise in the UK?
Well, I will say yes, I think.
And what makes you say that?
Yeah, well, the kind of things we see happening at the moment, the kind of, you know, comments people make tells us actually it's on the rise.
One issue still casting a long shadow is the ongoing war in Gaza. Since the conflict began in October, there have been more than 2,000 cases of Islamophobia in the UK, according to the anti-racism charity Tell Mama, while the Community Security Trust, which monitors anti-Jewish incidents, said there had been around 2,700 cases involving anti-Semitism in the same time. For the organisers of Saturday's march, it's proof that the battle to fight the politics of hate and division is arguably one of the biggest challenges that this country faces. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, London.
It's the grassroots soccer tournament that boasts world-class performances. The finals of China's Village Super League have kicked off in Guizhou province. Known for its festive, fun atmosphere, it's also made social media superstars of its players. CGTN's Li Ju-wan and Mike Fox have more from the match.
It's a grassroots soccer tournament completely organized by and for the local villagers, and none of them are professional players. They're teachers, truck drivers, policemen, farmers, students and restaurant owners and construction workers. The youngest, 12 years old, with the most senior player aged over 60. So there's no age limit, no gender limit. Anyone can play as long as you're good. And one thing they have in common, huge passion for soccer. Now, Rongjiang is such a unique place. The love for soccer is in their blood. This is a small mountainous county that is home for 28 ethnic minority groups. I'm wearing a traditional dress from the Miao community, so if you ever come to visit, you get to experience a makeover like this. They have 14 standard soccer fields in this county, and more than 70% of the schools here provide soccer coaching. And soccer was first brought to Rongjiang in 1940. So if you talk to the villagers, they'll say, oh, we've been playing the sports for over 80 years. We're like the OGs, and everybody loves it. Even toddlers love to play it. And it's making real changes to people's life, too. Last year, during the game season, Rongjiang County attracted more than 5 million tourists, translating into tourism income of nearly 6 billion yuan, or over $840 million US. And I find that really impressive. Mike, how do you feel about the games?
Well, I think it's been a fantastic first day of action here in Rongjiang. Obviously, my first time coming here, my first time experiencing this kind of atmosphere, this kind of village experience within China, it kind of reminds me of the non-league that we have in England, where these kind of teams, these kind of matches are the bedrock of the local communities. They haven't got lots of money, they don't charge too much for tickets, they generate their income based on what happens on a match day. No TV deals, no shirt sales, nothing like that. It's just the passion for your local community. And to see it come to China is something I've been extremely delighted to see, because I think it's fair to say Chinese football domestically or on the international front has been in a dark place for a while. No one can argue that it's going well. So I think Chinese football needs to create some sort of new identity. And having something like this, although it's relatively new in terms of its format, these villages, these traditions, like the one Cho Yuan is wearing, have been around for hundreds, thousands of years. So if you can combine those sense of traditions with football and a new league in this village surrounding, then you create a new Chinese football identity. And I think we're going to see more and more international icons from the world of football coming together to put their support behind this project. And I think the future is extremely bright.
Well, it's all kicking off in Guizhou. Our top stories again. Israel's Prime Minister approves plans for an attack on Rafah, just as ceasefire talks are said to be on the brink of restarting. Officials in Gaza say an overnight attack on a refugee camp has killed at least 36 people, including many children. And President Putin accuses Kiev of disrupting elections as a Ukrainian missile strike kills 2 in Russia. That is the world today. Thanks for watching. More news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's The Agenda with Juliet Mann. For now, from all of the team here in London, goodbye.